Now, without further delay, it is my pleasure to introduce our next panel consisting of Blue Weber, Cody Christianson, and Mike Bittner. Today, they'll be discussing lessons learned from the Bismarck-Mandan Safe Routes to Services, Fargo's University and 10th Street Corridor Study, and more in their presentation, Communication First, Engineering Second. Please join me in welcoming Blue, Cody, and Mike to the stage.
Well, thanks everybody. This presentation is inspired by the idea that no matter how great your engineering vision is, no matter how grand the scale is, no matter how perfect your plan sets are, it doesn't matter if you can't get the public to either get behind it, build compromise around it, or champion for it. And so we're going to walk through 3 scales of projects to talk through some ideas and lessons learned, and really recognizing that this is the type of topic that has gotten harder over the years. I think engineering with all the technology has actually gotten easier, but the engagement part has gotten a little bit challenging. And I know Dan Hansen from West Fargo is here. We just got yelled at last Thursday, so we know that there's still lots of work to be done, but we hope that we can share some good ideas that you might find some value in, and maybe you can share us some ideas with us afterwards as well. So we're going to, so we'll talk through 3 presentations, and to start us off, Blue's going to talk through the Bismarck-Mandan Safe Routes to Services project.
Yeah, thanks. Safe Routes to Services. So first off, Mike let me go first since I'm the most boring person out of the 3 of us, so it'll wake you up after I'm done. That's what Cody's here for. So the Safe Routes to Services was a project here in the Bismarck-Mandan area that we were very excited to come and work on, and really started to kind of delve into how do we get people from either their residence or maybe where they're currently at to the different services. And this is a study, this first slide really wants to just kind of show something that I think it's easy to think maybe underserved populations are a small portion of our communities, but we know that they're not. So when we're looking at houses below the poverty line, that's 10% of our households in the area, and that's just households, not only residents, but also knowing what the percentage of the population is of Native Americans and people who live in a household with 1 or more people with disabilities. So together that makes up nearly 40% of our communities. So these studies aren't just for those underserved populations, but they really are important for almost half of our communities, and really benefits everybody in the community when we start talking about it. So one of the other, there we go, perfect. So when we started looking at this, we started looking at, okay, well, we know where maybe some of these populations are living, where maybe some of those underserved populations are located, but what are some of the challenges that they're facing within our communities? And so we started by looking at, well, bike ped crashes, looking at it as well as who's in these bike ped crashes. So looking at based on which neighborhoods we're talking about, 55% of these crashes and accidents were happening in high density of Native American and underserved populations, so low income neighborhoods. So really important for us to start at that level. This study, like Mike already talked about, was so foundational in its engagement and making sure that not just are we trying to talk to everybody in the community, but who are we talking to and why are we talking to them? Because it's actually not that valuable to get information from every single person. It's really important to get information from the people who are impacted, especially when it comes to a study like this. So we had engagement every single month pretty much during this entire process. And this was everything from some listening sessions, some pop-ups, and really getting down to the nitty-gritty of engaging with the public and with the exact populations that we needed to hear from. So an important part of that was specific engagement planning. So this goes both with working with the DOT, working with local jurisdictional groups, but also working with our steering committee and kind of outlining what this is going to look like. And so not just saying, here's when we're going to do an open house, but okay, well, why are we doing an open house? And this started with our stakeholder analysis relationship management assessment. I don't think anybody in this room is unfamiliar with the amount of acronyms that we like to throw out there. So we just wanted to put another one out there as SARMA. And this was really how we started to look at it with our entire group of who are we trying to talk to and how much engagement do we want to have with them. And so we took this and started to quadrant people out. So saying, okay, this is a group that we're going to want to have a lot of engagement with, or this is a group that we just want to make sure that we're hearing with, or this is a group that we want to make sure are hearing from us on everything. And so outlining that process and making sure that we were sticking to it and then being able to come back and evaluate it during each phase, because it's not ever just something that the first day is how we know it's all going to lay out. We learn as the process is going on. We're hearing from different people in our communities, what is it that we need to focus on in our next steps. So we did come back to this as a kind of foundational group of our steering committee. This was the voice leading us through this entire process. You'll see both of the communities of Bismarck-Mandan, the transit agency, but also some of those more community-based organizations, public health, because these are the people who, when we're talking about underserved populations, they're out there working directly with those populations. And if we don't have those service providers as part of our conversation, we're missing a lot of those different aspects of it. But one of the best things on this project that was so much fun to work with was, some of you might already be familiar with these 4 groups that we have up here, but these were our community advisory groups. This was a tool that we used on this project and something that we've started to use in a lot of different projects across the state because it has become so invaluable. So these 4 different groups, not only were they kind of a steering committee-esque, but they were also compensated for their time. So when we're talking Sacred Pipe or Youth Works or Ministry on the Margins, these are small but very impactful organizations in our communities. These are groups sometimes of staffs of 4 to 5. So we're not talking millions of dollars of budget. We're talking a couple $100,000. And so to pay them for their sharing of the information, to pay them for hosting these listening sessions for us so we could actually get into those communities and hear directly from the people. One of the most heartbreaking moments of this entire study was one of our listening sessions at Ministry on the Margins. So for those who aren't familiar, Ministry on the Margins is more or less a homeless shelter here in the Bismarck area. It serves a lot more than that. They have a lot of religious ceremonies inside. They have a food pantry in there, but they just kind of serve as a home for a lot of people. So being able to go and listen to the populations who actually are residing there was heartbreaking. Seriously, getting to hear that somebody passed away being out in the cold because of their lack of access to transportation was one of those perfect indicators as to why this study was so important for this area. But also talking to the Missouri Valley Coalition for Homeless Peoples, this is a coalition of about 36 organizations in the area who try to work directly with underserved populations, be it unhoused or be it people of color or be it low mod income households, trying to hear from them. And one of the other things that you'll see on here is we started to take all of our feedback from these, from kind of the other aspects of the project, and we started to map it out. I think it's really easy to think, okay, people are gonna tell us that they don't feel comfortable walking to this area. Well, where is it that they're not feeling comfortable? Because that doesn't always line up directly with the data that we have. And so being able to map out that input and hear it directly from these service providers and keep communication with them the whole time was vital. Some of the things that we did in this project was, like I said, some of those listening sessions, going back to those same groups for pop-up sessions was super, super important because it's not only showing them that we are going to listen to them, but showing them that we're actually incorporating their feedback as well. And that's part of this entire feedback loop. Strategic open houses, holding those at the Dream Center, holding those at the Morton-Mandan Public Library, so that way we're reaching where a lot of these populations are. And then an element of this was creating a very strong digital presence in the area for this entire process. So we had this website where you could go on, you could map your own feedback to us, you could run around in surveys, but then this actually is our executive summary. So this is how we wanted to present the information to the broader public. So this shows more or less kind of what we were learning, what we were finding out from people throughout this entire project, but also kind of what our findings were and how we are going to present that out. So right now you're seeing a lot of those different demographic issues, those different demographic outliers of where people were located, but then also kind of just showing people, hey, here's how we are touching base with everyone, and then here's how we map that out. So here you can zoom in and you can actually see one of the places that Cody's going to talk about that we spent a lot of time in this area talking about and learning about was an area that didn't have sidewalks, that not one that I would typically think of as a place where people are walking because there's no sidewalks. So we also mapped out what all of these different services were. That's what you're seeing right here. And then we get to talk about these different cards that, like I said, Cody will touch on. That's where we get to take that feedback and everything that we learned and tie it in with all of the different data and then tie it all back together. What are the final outcomes for this project? So one of the ways that we did that, like I said, was we really started to score where all of our different services were. So creating a rubric that said, okay, what what really starts to boil up to the top as the most important areas. And from there, I'll hand it off to Cody so he can kind of jump in.
All right, thanks, Blue. Yeah, so we started looking at, again, we knew where people were at. We started to know what the services that they were trying to access. So then looking at what are then the technical barriers for getting from point A to point B. So looking at our high-speed roadways or places that lack bus, bike, ped facilities, places where we're in those different environmental justice areas, to really start to piece together the whole story, and using that to then come up with some priority areas and some strategies. So we're able to kind of dive in a little bit more in depth in a couple particular areas, both in Mandan as well as Bismarck, and then some more overarching strategies, policy framework to really help out both communities and really being able to step up and provide these safe access for their everyday lives. So an example of kind of how this came out to fruition is an example in Bismarck, Airport Road. This is the one that Blue talked about. It's a 5-lane roadway right in the middle of Bismarck. It's one of the railroad crossings to get from the south side into downtown. There's no sidewalks, so there aren't a lot of crashes that are going to pop up on a regular safety study of this isn't a critical safety issue. But then as you start to dive in and understand, again, on the north end, you're having the ministry on the margins, those places people are trying to get to. You have the mobile home park on the south end of the corridor, and really start to see that this roadway is acting more of a barrier than an access. So putting those different pieces together and being able to kind of explain that in this front page, one-pager, then starting to dive into some of those solutions. Okay, now that we've identified this project area and what the issues are, what can we look to both as a short-term and long-term solution? What can the cities go out there and do in these communities in a relatively short time frame, low budget, high impact solutions, adding some sidewalks, filling in some of those gaps, putting in some ped refuge islands where we have some offset T intersections so we don't have all the left turns where we need that dedicated left turn lane. So really trying to dive into those as well as looking at the long term. Again, this maybe isn't a project that's on that, giant Reconstruction future project, but still looking to see what those opportunities would be to really create that safe access. So again, 5-lane road, don't have the traffic volumes to necessarily support that in the future, but instead of saying, well, let's recon the whole thing to a 3-lane, we'll do that, is more looking at, okay, let's maybe get rid of the 2 outside lanes and still make it a 3-lane, but we're not reconstructing the entire roadway. So really looking at that from both the budget side, from city and state perspective, but also making sure we're creating those improvements. So we did that at a number of those different priority locations, but then we also looked at some of the strategies. The transit circulator route in Bismarck came one of those that as we started to identify what those different areas and services were, and again, using that map that Blue talked about, we started to see how that could be, again, kind of a route around Bismarck. And so put together this circulator route where, 2 buses can be on a 30-minute frequency and you can get to all these stops on a continuous circuit. And again, proposed implementation, we may need some modifications to the current orange transit route, but again, some opportunities to create that connected service to those different areas through Bismarck, and also making sure to connect with the Bisman transfer point to get over to Mandan as well. Along with that, in tangent with that, we had a lot of discussion on mobility hubs. And again, so these are areas where we're bringing a number of different modes together in particular locations. So you have, traditionally centered around bus and transit stops, but also looking at, lockers, bike share, bike parking, micromobility, and really setting out and having the conversations with that steering committee. You know, we had a lot of concerns of, okay, we build this, who's maintaining it? Who's maintaining X, Y, and Z? So having those conversations with those different groups in the room, we're able to get some progression forward on who those may fall under and what agreements could be put in place in the future. But also having the conversations of, you know, all of these items are great, but not every location needs all of the amenities. Maybe there's a number of locations where we just need to add some, you know, bike parking and some public lockers at a bus stop versus somewhere else where we may want, you know, a air-conditioned and heated building that's adjacent to the transit stop because it is serving a lot more functions. And so really being able to put those together and having those different groups in those conversations really started to get the public agencies excited, talking about it, getting city commissioners on board to really get things going, looking at what those federal grant opportunities were. And I mean, there were opportunities. City of Mandan was already putting forward raise grant and other grant opportunities for some of the projects before the project was even fully completed, because they saw the energy behind it and the talks with their folks, both commissions. So with that, we'll jump to you, Mike.
And kudos to Kim, who's in the crowd here. If we missed anything, let us know at the end. And this next one, got some participants too. Jeremy, I saw Tom, Ben. This is the University 10th Street Corridor Study. This is a really unique study area. Got the north arrow turned right here, but this is a one-way pair through the heart of Fargo that goes from 19th Avenue North to 13th Avenue South. So it's about 6 miles of corridor that really covers all of the most unique uses in the region. We have the NDSU crossing locations. We've got the Fargo Dome Event Center area. We've got a lot of our core neighborhoods, and we've got downtown, all within this one diverse area. This corridor does experience a wide variety of unique issues because of that overall diversity. It's one of the most active corridors in the entire state. We have 3,600 kids enrolled at 9 schools within a half a mile. At any given time, we have 1,800 bikes on NDSU campus, and the recent transit development plan has University Drive carrying upwards of 19 buses per day. And so when you compare that to Fargo averages, that is either double or triple that amount. So lots of movement. It's also one of our biggest crash corridors in the entire city of Fargo as well. 7 of our top 10 crash rate intersections are along these 2 corridors, most along University Drive. 12% of the Metro-wide ped bike crashes are along this corridor, and traffic speeds were far and away the #1 complaint that we heard along this stretch. And if you're doing lots of corridor studies now, I think that's something that we hear more and more often, is how to control the speeds, not just during peak hours, but late at night when there's drag racing and people feel unsafe. This corridor has a ton of regional utility, and I think it wasn't fully obvious because it operates so effectively as a one-way pair. And typically when you look at roads, you look at the average daily traffic of that individual road, and you say, oh, there's only 15,000 cars. That's not that many. But when you think about this in tandem and combine the 2 roads together, it is our 3rd highest traffic corridor in the region with about 30,000 vehicles per day. And so it really is effectively moving lots of traffic. And because of some of those major event sites, we see upwards of 40% to 140% increases in traffic volumes. It's also a truck route, and so there's lots of different utility provided by this roadway. So what was really challenging from an engagement perspective on this project were a few things. Recently, Fargo has had a lot of really successful downtown projects that NP and First converted to a one-way pair to 2-way. They've also had the Main Avenue Road Diet, and so there was a lot of energy behind giving up space of the road back to the public. And what we heard a lot was a grassroots effort of this will work no matter what, right? We've seen it work. I don't want to see the data. I know it works, right? And so we were kind of battling the idea of anecdotes versus analysis as we went through the process. And some people had already drawn the conclusion of what the answer is before we started. It's also one of the most diverse corridors, just lots of different users along the stretch. And then just the idea of this unresolvable issues. The speeding, that's happening everywhere. That's not something you can fix unless you totally rebuild the project. So how are you going to fix that? So we went in knowing this full, eyes wide open, and dove into one of the most intense engagement processes the city has ever seen.
Yeah, so again, kind of those critical pieces of engaging with the right people at the right time in the right way. So, again, as Mike mentioned, some of our historic neighborhoods, so we were going door to door, knocking, making sure we were getting in front of those people. We also had a number of focus groups where we were talking to specific groups of people, largely in the downtown area, visiting the businesses, getting out there, talking to the folks on and around the corridor, as well as getting out and having our public events and pop-ups, interviews, emails, all of the things, and a really large and robust online engagement. And so one of those critical things, and one of the, that's not the word, yep, was having fun with the engagement, and really being able to draw people to our, especially at our pop-ups. You'll see on the left, that was tailgating ahead of an NDSU Bison game as we were up on University and 10th. So kind of bringing that beer pong mentality of selecting kind of where you lied with the different concepts that were presented there, as well as being downtown and providing for some of those opportunities to engage with different parts of the public. So you had your, people that were coming for events and coming to the NDSU tailgate, the people that are downtown on a weekend at a farmer's market, and not just the people that are living and working on the corridors, but also those that are coming on special events and commuters as well. And speaking of those folks, the commuters, one of the hardest people to engage with on a corridor project is the traveling public. It's easy to get some neighborhoods to stop by an open house or an event to talk about the street that runs in front of their house, but somebody that's just driving down University or 10th on a regular business day is harder to connect with. So we had this idea of putting up these Burma shave signs along the corridor of getting those people to stop by and attend some of the events we were hosting. We also used some of the digital billboards to draw people to the website and online engagement, as well as some strategic flyers to kind of go around and get people excited and engaged with the project. Another key piece was working with the local news media and having our presentations with the city commission, and also engaging with the traditional media of the newspaper posts and having things up with those folks as well. And again, kind of one of those critical pieces was on the online engagement. This is an example of our input ID tool online, so you can get in. This is when we were in that concept stage. So you're able to go through the different concepts. It's all anonymous. You can see people's comments. You can add to them. You can respond to them. You can add your own. But then you're also able to click through, put in the aerial, find your house, find your business, see how those different alternatives can really work with what you're seeing and provide that feedback there. The other thing that was in addition to that was another kind of virtual tool for you to be able to get more of a future view of what the corridor would be versus concept drawing that can only do so much. So being able to have a three-dimensional video of, again, putting some different concepts on the ground, what that would actually look like in the downtown segment, where we had some more of that alternative piece with the 3-lane section that's there. So you're able to show, okay, what would a shared use path look like here? What would a separated bike lane look like here? What would that two-way conversion look like to get people engaged and really thinking of what that future condition could be? And so through that, we talked about, the traffic portion of it, but we also came to a number of different areas where we were like, okay, well, what can we do to meet the public's need for what they are looking for safety, slower traffic, better bike and ped connections. And so one package that we put together was some bike connectivity. So looking at where those existing facilities were, Again, dealing with railroads and some of those railroad overpasses along University and 10th were some of the key barriers for the bike connectivity. So while you may be able to find a parallel route for bikes in the south area from 13th Avenue South up to downtown or north of downtown, what do you do when you get to those underpasses and there isn't that parallel route? So looking at what those opportunities would be, and that played into some of those downtown conversion areas as well.
I think the one thing is kind of connected into the title of this presentation. The one thing we learned is that there was the vast majority, 95% of the feedback we got was, we don't want this corridor reimagined. We want the problems that bother me day to day fixed. And so instead of, you typically do corridor studies or roadway projects and you develop alternative 1 and alternative 2, and it's this big corridor with a couple of sub options. What we really ended up with was a package of various different things that we wanted to improve. And so other than the downtown area that Cody showed, most of the improvements we looked at were smaller scale. It's really hard to cross here. I feel really unsafe there. I wish speeding would stop through this area. And so another great example of that is crossing locations. We had the vast majority of our crashes were actually occurring at signalized intersections and not away from them. And so we developed a package that restricted left and right turns when the pedestrian push button was actuated. We also had lead pedestrian interval to give people 4 to 7 seconds of advance time, and then also looked for different crossing areas to get people across a little bit easier. We also looked at a variety of different spot traffic safety and operations improvements. There's just certain things you're not going to be able to fix immediately unless you were to rebuild the corridor, but phased access management, looking at the potential for law enforcement confirmation lights. We had about twice as many angled crashes as we expected along this corridor. Special adaptive signal control in and around the Fargo Dome to be more responsive. And then one of the biggest challenges we had is because it's such a high crash corridor, what we were finding is that most folks were coming to the intersection. If you've driven this corridor and come from a side street, you've probably come to an intersection where there's a giant tree and some utilities, and you're like, I sure hope there's nobody coming, and you enter the intersection. But that was the thing that people liked most, was the tree canopy. They're like, don't make the corridor hideous and knock out the trees. So how do you find that balancing act of something seemingly simple but extremely complicated? So working through the city's tree replacement plan, we identified which trees were causing the actual problems, and then they start to become phased out through their process for a smaller trunk tree or relocated around the corner. And so again, not something that we can just go out and fix all the trees, but as you develop a plan that really doesn't have funding to be built tomorrow, this is a nice opportunity to be able to build a plan to be able to adjust those things. Now, probably the one that was most interesting to the public was related to traffic speeds. Again, this is where they felt like this was an unresolvable problem. What are you going to do? The dynamic speed display signs, we're all familiar with those. They've got some temporary benefits for a very small section of roadway. We talked about the geometric solutions that Cody showed through the downtown area where we had an extra third lane. We looked at some other spots, but pretty expensive, pretty challenging. We even went through lots of big data to start to map out where people are drag racing when, so that the police would have kind of a roadmap to look at. But where we found the most interest in the solution packages we presented, again, these are small things that we're trying to move the needle, was related to signal timing. So during the peak periods, it's when you're working on a one-way corridor, when you time the signals, it's pretty simple. It's distance and speed, and that's when you make the signal green to let people go through the corridor. And so we looked at an analysis of what happens if we tighten that up and we make it so that if you're going 35, you're going to hit a red, and we're going to put signs up that say set signal for 30 miles per hour and try to train drivers down to those speeds. But where we saw the biggest complaints and the biggest challenge was related to late night, fast driving, drag racing. Most of these corridors are so quiet that they're just, every signal's green so people can fly through the corridor. So we looked at a solution called Rest in Red operations. And so the way that this works is the low volume signals, there's the big signals, for example, University and 12th Avenue by campus, is always going to have traffic on it, so it's going to cycle around. But the lower volume intersections don't. And so everything starts in red. And then you have advanced detection. So if a car's coming and you're on the main line, it'll detect your speed and it'll say, okay, you're going 45 miles per hour. I'm not flipping this to green until you slow your speed down. If you're going 30 or less, then it's going to say, all right, come on through. It'll flip the green, and you'll drive the corridor almost like it's coordinated just specifically for you. And so we found a case study on a one-way pair in Albuquerque, New Mexico that did this exact solution. And the graphic on the bottom right is a great example of the results of this. You know, if you just look at the average speeds, that can often be misleading when you look at speeding. The average speed's only changed by about 5 miles per hour, but look at the black line. You can see all that extreme speeding was all but resolved when you were able to eliminate those late night events. So our last example that we're going to talk through is on the 42nd Demers project in Grand Forks, and so lots of folks that are involved in this one. Michael and Wayne I saw in here, so if I'm presenting anything I shouldn't be, you just shout at me, all right? Yeah, it's good. We got police in here. And if you've got any real questions on this project that like smart engineers should answer, don't ask me or Blue, because we don't know that. We're just here to talk about the engagement.
Pretty obvious.
Yeah, so this is really just how do we connect a massive project of this scale to a good engagement strategy. And it's a very different engagement strategy than what we're doing. So as you've seen the progression of high-level planning to corridor alternatives analysis, this is a final design project, very different. And so there's a video playing if you're unfamiliar with the project itself. It's a major railroad grade separation. It's a very significant project. Currently, the cost estimates are upwards of $70 million. But what's unique about this project is the timeline to build it's about 10 months. So it's about half or a third of what you typically have to design a project of this magnitude. So we wanted to make sure that we started our communication plan recognizing that things are going to change a lot in a 2-week window. We need to have a communication mechanism built to be responsive for that. There's also, it's a big hole with widespread impacts. It's a really big hole. It's the 2 arterials right next to the interstate. It's going to be impactful as this thing's getting built. It's also a big structure seen by all visitors. So think about any visitor going to Grand Forks. More than likely you're going to campus, the Alaris Center, downtown. This is your primary location that you would go through. So this would be seen by lots of folks.
So an important thing to note is when it's talking about stakeholders or public involvement, it's not always necessarily every person in town. Sometimes it is very specific people. And so it was a fun aspect of this process of starting to identify, okay, similar to the Safe Routes to Services, who do we talk to and why is this such an important piece of communication? So we really started to kind of divide them out based on this grid. And so saying, okay, a lot of these groups, we need to make sure that they are satisfied with everything that we're doing. So this is everything from federal highway to NDTC management team, making sure that they know what's going on, keeping them informed. Working closely, that's so much working directly with the city. So these are the people who are part of kind of our team putting this together. But then we also have kind of the groups that aren't as much ones who need to be in the weeds of it, but ones that we want to make sure are part of that entire process and are really involved in what's going on. And so keeping them informed or monitoring kind of what they're starting to say about it. So this is everything from city council, things like that, but also a lot of Mike's point of the stakeholders around here. UND is right there. Altru is about a mile away from this. So we're talking one of the main regional hospitals. So really starting to look at those groups and how we need to be keeping them involved in the whole process. So like I said, on here, it was a lot of those were kind of those critical stakeholders. How are we talking to them? Oh, no. Sorry about that. There we go.
There you go. Too far.
This is why we should only have one person pressing buttons, and it should not be Blue, ever. So like I said, we kind of gridded those out and decided, okay, where are these ones? But as far as these critical stakeholders, how are we making sure that they're along the whole process with us? And so the Alaris Center is one of these huge regional event centers. How are they informed on this, but how are they also involved in the process? And so this is everything from some one-on-one meetings, as well as getting out in front of those groups, as well as getting out to city council and kind of keeping them informed with, hey, what are we working on? What are the main updates that you need to know about? So that way, once we're into those next phases, they're brought in.
And I'm about to show a tool that we're updating currently, but this was a preliminary draft of what it could look like. It's a 4D schedule, really designed to be able to tie the different phases of the overall project so impacted stakeholders could get a better understanding of exactly how they're going to be impacted, how their operations need to function, and be able to be engaged within that. And so some of these routes and the different concepts of the construction have been updated, so this isn't currently up to date. Really, it's just designed to illustrate the tool in which we were using on such a significant project. It also allows us to be able to get down into the kind of the real world space of looking at the concept itself and be able to review and provide comments. But really the interactive nature of it is probably most beneficial when you're dealing with, like I said, a really big hole, is how do those phases work together? Because each of those different phases are going to have different operations as you move through it. I also mentioned earlier that this project is going to change dramatically every 2 weeks. And so we wanted to think through a way that we could keep our project team, which includes members of the DOT, City of Grand Forks, and others, more engaged, like they felt like they're part of the project team. And so this is a project management dashboard that's designed to be updated alongside our 2-week project updates for the DOT. We're hoping to kind of replace it, but you put all the information in. It allows you to check the different key areas to determine, what's behind schedule, what's ahead of schedule, what's behind budget, what's ahead of budget, what are the key things that are happening now, what's happening next. And really our vision when we started this dashboard was there's going to be folks that are going to miss a 2-week one of our meetings, and they're going to wonder what's going on, or they just want to know intermediately, and someone's going to call them. We wanted to build a tool that they could pull this up and then have the answers that they needed to be able to make sure that they feel like they're really in the weeds of the overall management of the project, because they are.
So in all of the engagement that we were doing and all the complexity of this project that Mike was talking about, it was also displacing a golf course. So anybody who's driven through this area, there's a golf course right at that intersection. And so where you can see the jug handle on the top left corner of that image is UND's Ray Richards Golf Course. So part of our collaborative nature of all of our engagement was also working directly with them. And so that's with a team that we have in-house, but doing these monthly design meetings. I'm not an avid golfer, so it's been a really neat process to kind of learn not just that golf courses are just that, they're also there for stormwater. It's also a major area for tourism. It's also a major area for this collaborative nature. And then the last thing that we want to talk about here is how important this corridor is for the visual aspects. And so this is something that we're also working on with this entire team, is how does this look? So not just how does this function in the utilities of it, the nature of driving through this area, but what is it gonna look like? And so this has been something that internally with our team, as well as with the DOT and the city staff, is how does this look? How do these different things shake out? And really, what does that look like at the end? Because all of this kind of has to work in tandem. So last thing to talk about, we're not that vain. We're not actually superheroes. It's just more fun to kind of laugh at ourselves in this way. But these projects are so important to build trust with the community. And so making sure that whenever we have an opportunity to work with community-based organizations or various stakeholders in an area, that's really how we see what success looks like.
Yeah, and just to hit on the point of, engaging with the public isn't always easy. There's challenges, there's challenging stakeholders, but going through that process and really working with them and coming back and having that feedback loop really does make the engineering side and the project completion all the better, and really can help get the public up and excited and ready for a construction project that is going to upend their daily lives in some aspect. So.
I don't know why we're superheroes in this graphic. Our graphic team made this, and all I know is we all had a chance to review it and change it, and we didn't, so there must be something behind that. My key takeaway that I would leave you all with is your engagement plan should be as diverse as the project you're working on. And so going through the 3 project examples we provided, Bismarck-Mandan, It's a regional project. The typical and most common approach is to use online tools to gather lots of information across the region. However, when 50% of your population doesn't have active connection to the internet or cell phones, that's not a very good approach. So you need to think differently. The second example on University and 10th Street is it's really easy to get the neighborhoods out when you send them a postcard. It's very difficult to get folks that are the driving community engaged. So how do you have a plan for them? And then finally, 42nd Demers, it's important to recognize that stakeholder involvement isn't just the general public, but how are you creating a platform in which communication can be seamlessly worked across a fast-paced environment on a project of a really significant nature so that you can be truly partners with DOT, city, and the other elements on the team. So with that, we appreciate it, your time. We're happy to answer any questions and any edits from the crowd on this. Everything's okay? Okay, all right. So any questions for us or any good ideas you want to share that we should consider too? I'd love that.
I'm curious about the Rest in Red in Fargo. Has that been implemented, and what have you seen?
It hasn't been implemented, so that study will be wrap up this spring. It is one of the recommendations. The nice thing about that recommendation is it's not an overly expensive solution. It's just a little bit of technology that you could add to it. And so what we recommended is, to me, that seems like the type of solution that'd be a pretty good highway safety improvement program project. Is Justin Schlosser in the room? So we're hopeful that some of these small things, you know, on that corridor, that's not going to be rebuilt as one. There's going to be small little projects that come across it, and we'll be able to track and hopefully report that back to you at another conference. Anyone have any really cool ideas or experiences that they want to share about engagement for the best betterment of the group? It's a group full of people that want to hear this. All right.
I'm stunned.
Done. All right, well, thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good job, Mike.
Let's take that off. No, we'll leave it up.
I think you can. They put it back up on the.
Oh, yeah. You're good to go.